Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back into the Katella Chronicles Podcast with your host, Dominick Lorenz. And today is a fantastic day to record a podcast and for you, the fans, to listen to a podcast because the Angels have been put to bed. It's over. We're not talking about it anymore. It's time for Anaheim Ducks hockey. The season is upon us. We're 2 games in. So much to love so far from the Anaheim Ducks in their 30th year. And we have 2 amazing people alongside me today to talk all things Anaheim Ducks. First and foremost, co-host David Goodkind back in the house. David, how's it going, my friend?
Been busy, man, but so happy to be back.
You know, we always try to get at least one podcast a month to try to keep the viewership and interest in. Again, David's had a lot of crazy things go on, so have I. And as well as our special guest today, he's had some crazy things going on, but it's been fun, crazy things because he was actually at Ducks home opener this past weekend. Give it up for our good friend from Ducks Gameday Breakdown on Instagram, Zach Gray.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's always great to have so many Ducks fans on a podcast talking all good things Ducks. It's a rebuilding franchise right now, but a franchise that's going in the right direction with proper management, proper GM, proper coaching. David, we can't say anything like that because as we're Angel fans, Zach, of course, is our quote-unquote resident Dodger fan in the house, but we all can commiserate a little bit because none of our teams are making it any further in the playoffs this year, unfortunately. So, you know, it's tough sled. And so before we get into anything, let's just cap off and check off the baseball mark because, you know, here at Katella Chronicles, we do both baseball and hockey. Zach, give me one pro and one con of the Dodger season in your mind.
I mean, the pro was we won 100 games, you know, like we've done the last 6 seasons. The con is Dave Roberts coming back next year as the manager. If I'm being totally honest with you, like I don't know what to say, but that if I had to say one big con, I would say that's it.
You know, the Dodgers getting swept out of the postseason against their division rival, Arizona Diamondbacks, not what was expected. You know, David and I, we both had the Atlanta Braves win in the World Series, and that plan did not go accordingly. So it's Phillies, Diamondbacks, Astros, Rangers, crazy things in baseball. David, for you and I, Angel fans, there's a lot of negatives that can be said, but give me one pro and one of the biggest cons this year for Angels baseball.
Shohei Ohtani played for our team. That was kind of cool. The rest of the teams can't say that for now. Next year, that may be a whole different story. The con is Artem Moreno likely owns the team on opening day, and my boycott lasts a whole nother season, and that stinks.
Yeah, for those that are not as familiar with David's boycott, he has been boycotting Angels baseball, not cheering for the team internally, but just actually physically going to the games. I think your last game was Reed Detmer's no-hitter.
Reed Detmer's no-hitter. So over a full season.
Over a full season.
Angels. I haven't given any money to Artie Moreno.
You know, the boycott is strong with David, but you know, he's been kind enough to come on the show, continue to give his hot takes, because there's been so much that we've had to endure over the last 2+ years. And David and I have been good buddies for Angels baseball for almost 3 years now. So it's been one of those situations where we've been grinding day in and day out with our boys in Anaheim. For me, I think a con definitely is Artie Moreno. He's still there, unfortunately. And for me, 1A and 1B is yet another year, yet another coaching change for the Angels once again. But a pro for me is, I don't even know. Brandon Drury, I'll be different. I know Shohei Ohtani is amazing, but Brandon Drury playing up and living up to the 2-year, $14 million contract. I guess you could say that. Some of the, you know, Logan O'Hoppy's leadership as a youngster could be a nice positive.
I liked Moustakas. Moustakas was a lot of fun.
Moustakas was a nice little piece of the puzzle. So there were small little itsy bitsy kind of pieces for the Angels, but again, it all culminated into another no playoff year. And again, all 3 of us, we can now commiserate about baseball and talk about hockey. Anaheim Ducks are back in session, 2 games into the year. Last Saturday, they kicked off with a 4-1 loss in Las Vegas, which is essentially a house of pain at T-Mobile Arena. But then they come home opener, 30th anniversary jerseys, the plum carpet, the whole festivities, and they deliver a 6-3 win against a very strong contending team in the Carolina Hurricanes. And Frank Vatrano gets a hat trick, his 4th career hat trick as well. So, Zach, I'm going to start with you because you were at the game. You've been at training camp a little bit here and there through the offseason. What are your initial takes from this team through the first 2 games of the season and through training camp?
I think starting with the Vegas game, they came out, they stayed with Vegas. I think that was the one big impressive part was, they took too many penalties, which was a con, which was not a good positive. And, watching this team, you can see and feel just by watching them, they have a plan. And I think that's one of the biggest things, especially heading into this year, is that, not knowing what to expect because, not everybody's heard of Greg Cronin. He was one of Randy Carlyle's guys, and he was kind of more off to the side, kind of in Randy Carlyle's shadow, not kind of, he was. And watching that Vegas game, I walked away from it. I was like, hey, man, if it wasn't for the penalties and for the bad line change with Cam Fowler and, that game was a lot closer than what the score actually said. And, and then heading into game 2, just seeing how they took it to Carolina in those first 2 periods. And then in the 3rd period, they, I don't know if they crushed up sleeping pills in the 3rd period and came out on the ice, but, I got worried there for a little bit, in the 3rd period. I was like, oh no. But just seeing their plan of attack with guys like Michnikov and Jackson Lacombe and doing all of this without Leo Carlsson and Killorn, it makes me wonder how much stronger this team actually is going to be when those guys come back. Like Leo Carlsson's going to make his NHL debut tomorrow. But just seeing this team, and even my wife, who's kind of been in and out of hockey the last 5 years, she's one of the biggest Ducks fans I know. Even she, when we were at opening night, was like, wow, like just stunned. Like this team has a backbone. They have an identity. They know where they want to go. And with Greg Cronin from training camp, you could see it from day one. I tried to get out there as much as I can. My office is literally right down the street, and I feel like that was on purpose. But, just seeing how he holds players accountable and he has a voice and he wants everything to be upbeat, up tempo and work on team systems. And even when it comes to going back to basics, he's very involved in that. And that's something that I really enjoy. And I know a lot of us Ducks fans have been screaming for a John Tortorella, but the thing that John Tortorella does is he instills fear. And with Greg Cronin, he's like, I just want you to know that when I call you out, it's not just because I want to yell at you. It's because I want you to identify what you did wrong. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great take, first and foremost, on Greg Cronin. I think that's something that the Ducks have been missing over the last 4+ years during the Dallas Aikens era was lack of accountability, lack of fundamentals. And it was just kind of riding the ship into the next era of Ducks hockey and not really finding a sense of identity. And Greg Cronin, right from day one, gave the Ducks identity, not instilling that fear, as you said, kind of like Tortorella, but just giving that opportunity to the young players of the Anaheim Ducks to say, hey, this is what we expect of you. This is what we want from you. We know you're capable. You wouldn't be here if that was the case, or pardon me, that wasn't the case. And we're going to ride you, but we're going to ride you in the right way. So I love that take initially. David, for you, through the first 2 games, and to Zach's credit, they were in it against Vegas, and Vegas has been a team that the Ducks have struggled with since Vegas's inception. And that's, they're the reigning, NHL champions. They just have a good foundation under them. But that game, on so many levels, was a breath of fresh air. What did you take from the Vegas game that was different from maybe in years past? And then overall from the Carolina game, let's just focus on the first 2 periods, because that's where the Ducks really strengthened up their lines and combinations, a sense in that home opener.
Well, you could tell last season the tank effort was intentional to an extent. Akins just wasn't doing a good job. Ownership was like, that's fine. We'll try to get a number one pick. So competitiveness initially, like the fact that they were hanging with Vegas, even though the results didn't show it. And then having them smell blood in the water for the Carolina game, that's been a breath of fresh air. Attacking often. The blue line playing a little bit better, seeing improvement there is great to see after how historically bad they were last year. And then just the youth movement actually being on display. Whereas last year you could see development here and there, and there were steps back though too, and it was just kind of all over the place. There's finally a plan in place. You can see it on the ice. And I don't know how much more to add to it, to what we've already talked about, but to see competitive hockey again. I had a buddy at the home opener, and he said it felt different. The stadium, the arena felt different, and fans could get excited again, even if this isn't a playoff team. Let's assume it's not. The fact that we're seeing competitive hockey, exciting hockey again. They're going to make mistakes. It's a young team with sprinkled veterans, and there's going to be stretches where we get frustrated, but I also think there'll be a lot of stretches where they're really competitive and giving fans something to root for.
Yeah, and over the last 2 years for Ducks hockey, last year being a franchise worst record, nearly getting the number one pick. David and I are still very frustrated about that. I'm pretty sure Zach is the same in that sense, how Chicago just kind of comes in and takes what could have been ours, but nevertheless.
Should have been.
Nevertheless, and then the year before
the marketing thing.
the conspiracy theories that come out from this.
I know.
And then the year before that, Ryan Getzlaf's final year, the season started good and then tailed off after the All-Star break. So Ducks fans have been kind of going through all the fields over the last 2 years, from high of highs to low of lows. And this year, that breath of fresh air. Zach, from what you saw in person at training camp, what was Greg Cronin focusing on? What were some of the established practices like? And what was that feeling inside of the practice building leading up to preseason and now the regular season?
I think day one, when I went out there, it was, working on neutral zone just quick, getting out of your zone, which is something that the Ducks had a very difficult time doing. I want to say within the last couple of years, just getting the puck out of their own zone, just making simple outlet passes. And, he worked on that over and over and over again. And then he worked on a lot of 2-on-2s, 3-on-2s, a lot of neutral zone traps, how to stop oppositions when they're coming into the zone, playing a lot of stick on puck, and a lot of small area puck battles, which is something that we had a very difficult time, I want to say, in the last 4 years, where we were getting outpossessed to crap, by other teams. And something that I took note to, because being a coach and everything, it's the tempo with the coaches like Craig Johnson and two of his other assistant coaches that have been there for a long time, and even the San Diego Gulls coach was very involved, and he's now 3-0, and he's doing a tremendous job down there in San Diego in the development team. And even day two, it was they would go from rink 3, which they would work on a lot of team stuff, and then rink 4, they would head over there and work a lot on, passing, a lot of edge work, which means like, your skates, your inside, your outside, your flat edge, and just working on a lot of basic stuff. And a lot of, some guys were not really about it, getting the stick taken out of their hands and just trying to, possess the puck without having a stick, but it makes you feel vulnerable. And it's something that a lot of players were like, oh, wow, like, I've never done this before, but you can just tell. And to add to what David was saying, I got his name right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at names. I'm so sorry.
For sure.
No, we're all good here.
To add to opening night, I mean, it just in the building, like you can just feel it. It was this, Eakins is gone. It's not on him. Like, he didn't do anything wrong. He was set up to fail from day one. Greg Cronin comes in. and you could just see the body language on the bench and on the ice, and you could just see these guys are buying into what he's selling. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm like, I believe in these guys. And this is something that I've been telling Ducks fans all off season. I'm like, just give it time, so.
We've had to be patient for such a long time. Again, we're now approaching 15 plus years since the Ducks won an only Stanley Cup. And there were some times in the early 2010s where you thought, okay, we made it to the Western Conference Finals, and then it slips away against Chicago and Nashville. And then you really saw the steady decline, and all the players that we used to know and love are gone. Getzlaf retired, Corey Perry's now with Chicago, and all the other players that are amongst the league are retired. So there is a changing of the guard, and Ducks fans have had to be patient in that sense. But regardless if you're a first year rookie, if you've been in the league for a little while, like a Troy Terry, or a veteran like a Cam Fowler, they're all buying into the system. It doesn't matter what level of hockey you are. Greg Cronin has brought in a sense of, and maybe it's a lack of a better term, but a sense of relief. Like, it's going to be okay. Yes, we got to quote unquote trust the process, but there is a sense of relief that better days are ahead. And another layer to that better day ahead, as we've mentioned already, Leo Carlsson, our number 2 overall pick from this year's NHL draft, will be making his debut Thursday at home against the Dallas Stars. For a moment there, I almost said Dallas Cowboys. I got balancing
it
baseball,
is football season.
Balancing baseball and football and hockey podcasts. Everything kind of flows.
Basketball's back this week too, right?
Basketball's coming back as well. So we're in that sports equinox era where everything's happening at once. But the Dallas Stars are in town. So let's jump on in Leo Carlsson. David, again, I know I mentioned this, and we're all kind of still salty about Connor Bedard and all that whole Chicago Blackhawks taking our number 1 pick. We shouldn't be shocked. But we all thought for a while, and the last time Zach and I talked was around the draft time, Greg Cronin being hired. It was Bedard, Carlsson, Fratelli, all of these top 3, top 4 picks. We end up getting Carlsson, which wasn't I guess you could say, favored selection by fans. What have you seen through Carlsson so far, at least early on? And what are your expectations for him early on in 2023/2024 rookie season?
I'm going to answer the second part of your question first. I have no expectations. I don't know what to expect. The kid's already got enough pressure being tied to Fantilli. Forget Bedard. His career will now be tied with Fantilli. It's what the Ducks could have had versus what they chose, and vice versa. So, I expect, obviously some moments of explosiveness. What's really impressed me about him is what's going on upstairs. He obviously still has some development on the ice, but he seems to be, like, at least in like the preseason and some practice, doing the smart play. So seeing that develop and get even stronger. He's a fast skater, so seeing that explosiveness on the ice. And yeah, it's just really watching him in depth. We followed Bedard, we followed Fantilli. Fantilli's over at Michigan. It's domestic, it's easier. But seeing him come to the States now, Carlsson, come to the States and see what he can do against NHL talent. I know him even being at this level is a surprise this year. I know he was supposed to be like another year off. So it kind of surprised some that, he's playing tomorrow in the NHL. So expectations just to see the raw talent and see it kind of sharpen over the length of a full season.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is ripe for the picking for Carlsson. Again, he had a lower body injury that kept him out of the first 2 games of the season. Again, the Ducks made it official this afternoon as we record this podcast on a Wednesday that he will be in the lineup tomorrow against the Dallas Stars. Now, a lot of fair weather hockey fans or people that don't follow the team as closely as the 3 of us do would probably think, oh, he's your number 1 draft pick in the first round. He's got to be playing on the top line with your best guys, right? That's not necessarily the situation at hand. So, Zach, for my question to you, and with your background in coaching and different things around the game of hockey, I think personally putting Leo Carlsson in a situation where he's with the best guys, front top line, might be a disservice to him right off the cuff. Again, big expectations, potentially a letdown, and you don't want to get into a young kid's head. Where do you think would be the sweet spot for him early on, maybe let's say the first 10 to 20 games of his NHL career would be within this Ducks lineup?
I think, for him to go back to the draft, just to kind of, go there for a minute, we were all shocked, and including myself, and you guys can check it out on my page. I have a live draft reaction, and I think it's because Connor Bedard and Adam Fantilli overshadowed Leo Carlsson, and in such a big way, where the NHL was trying to market Adam Fantilli and Connor Bedard so much that we're like, who the hell is this kid? Like, we've never heard of him before. If you're a obsessed, crazy person like the three of us, we're, following this stuff every day, and I have it on good authority, and people I've talked to with the organization and everything, that he is a complete player. He's like if Ryan Getzlaf and Anze Kopitar had a baby, Leo Carlsson, like that's what it would basically be. But I think if you were to slide Leo Carlsson into the top six, either at wing or at center, he can play anywhere. But watching him in a couple of preseason games live and on TV, just watching him, he's composed, he's mature, he looks like he's been there for a long time. And, people were looking to write him off at development camp. And I'm like, dude, can you imagine the amount of pressure and the things that are going through his mind, every single day? I mean, he was playing in the International League with a bunch of NHL caliber players. And that's why I'm like, guys, don't write him off. It was like when Mason McTavish got first drafted. I was like, guys, give him a chance. And I have a source of mine who spoke to Paul Correa, who we all know, and he cuts his hair once a week. And he's like, the next captain of this team is going to be Mason McTavish. And it's just like, guys, like, give him a chance. Let's see what he can do. And in his first game with Mason McTavish, he scored a goal. And it's like, and I know Ducks fans are impatient. I know a lot of them don't pay as attentively to this team as I do, or you, or David. And it's just, it's about a process. And that's why I think in year 2 with Greg Cronin, this team is going to be so, they're already exciting. Imagine where they're going to be this time next year.
Yeah.
So
I think it's one of those situations where we're in the society we live in, regardless if it's personal lives, sporting lives, whatever element you're looking at, it's that initial reaction. It's that, I got to have feedback. I need to have a very ASAP mentality, and it's instant gratification. Yeah. And I think when you're dealing with sports, and it really doesn't matter if it's hockey, baseball, basketball, football, whatever, there's going to be maturation time that takes with rebuilding franchises. David, I think
I think a lot of that also has to do with the overlapping fan base of the Angels, who haven't been through a rebuild and just have stunk for a decade. So now you throw on top of a historically really successful franchise in the Ducks, and the patience starts to become a lot thinner, because now you have 2 bad teams where the Ducks would carry when the Angels were, crapping the bed, and the Ducks are at least making the postseason and being competitive there. Don't have that right now. So I think that has a lot to do with why Anaheim fans are a little impatient at the moment.
And rightfully so. I really think so. Zach, you have a thought?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I totally get why Anaheim fans are frustrated because of dealing with, we should have sold Ohtani and got a haul and started over. Like, I get that. And, and then with Ducks, we had a GM, and I think we talked about this on our last podcast together, was we had a GM in Bob Murray who was refusing to buy into the rebuild. He wanted to retool. He wanted to, okay, I'm going to fill it with these veteran players and hope that it sticks. And it just didn't. And I think that's the biggest takeaway, that with Pat Verbeek, and even though we've been through it this summer, like, don't get me wrong, I've been stressed out, losing sleep, and I'm not kidding when I say that. because I care so much about this freaking team. And it's just, I want them to succeed just like all three of us do. But, you know, Pat Verbeek is one of those guys where it's like, you know, I'm going to give you some tough love. And we're not used to that. We're just not.
No, not at all. And again, for David and I, that's something we've been the town criers of for a very long time of, hey, Angels, take note from what the Ducks are doing management.
Do something different, man. Do something different. The Ducks finally did something different.
You got to spice up your life and your organization in some way, shape, or form. Artie Moreno, take a note from the Samuelis of how to run a proper organization from the top down. But when you look at all of this, and already so far, positivity amongst this Ducks squad, absolutely no doubt about it. And again, we're only 2 games into a very long NHL season that goes all the way into April. There's a lot to love from this team. And there was something that Zach mentioned that it wasn't a part of the notes, but I actually want to dive into a little bit, is the leadership of this team on the ice with the players. 2nd year in a row, post Ryan Getzlaf era, there is no captain on this team. You get 3 A's on their chest. And you talked about how your source says Mason McTavish has that opportunity to be that next captain of the Ducks. Troy Terry, and this kind of morphs into another topic we're going to talk about. Troy Terry getting his big contract over the summer. Trevor Zegras gets his 3-year deal. Jamie Drysdale gets a 3-year deal. So you're starting to see the core of this next era of Ducks hockey really come into focus. Looking at leadership on ice player-wise, who in your mind is that leadership right now, Zach? And I know you mentioned already, but who can be out of this young core in the future?
I think it's either going to be Troy Terry, and I'm going to start with him first. Okay. Every training camp day that I went to for the 3 days, and went to a couple of practices here and there. By the way, if you guys are looking to go to a practice, it's at Great Park Ice. You'd have to call. They don't post it. So Troy Terry, after every single skate that he's been in, and he was in Group 1, he was talking with Greg Cronin every time. Like, Greg Cronin was talking to him. He's like, hey, you know, this and that. And the other thing, I didn't know what the conversation was exactly, but you could just tell, like, they were talking about how they can execute that play or execute, you know, certain things up and down the ice. First day of training camp, I'm going to get to Mason McTavish now. That poor guy was sitting every single day at training camp until he could get back on the ice because he had that, I think it was lower body or upper body, I'm not sure.
He had some sort of small injury. He was
watching. Okay. And so he was watching from the penalty box, from the bench. And that's something that really just kind of stayed with me. And I'm like, this kid gets it. Like, he gets it. And just seeing the way that guys are composed, I just don't see Trevor Zegras as that guy. As vocal as Trevor Zegras is, he may be an alternate captain down the line. But McTavish and Troy Terry are so mature and they understand what it takes to be a leader. And I think if they were going to make a decision next year, you know, if they wanted to go a 3rd year without a captain and they still want to evaluate things, I don't think it's going to take that long. I could see it being either Mason McTavish or Troy Terry because they understand what it takes to be that leader and having that pressure. I don't see it being Cam Fowler. I know he's the longest tenured veteran there. I just don't see it.
And that was one thing before, David, I get to you on your take on this, that was something I think last year that I thought in the last year of the Dallas Eakins era, now coming into the Cronin era, is Cam Fowler. And he's been a Duck for life. He's been through the highs and the lows. And he just seems like, again, for the fan that just kind of turns their head, oh, he's there the longest. He should be the guy. He's got to know the system. And I get that. And I was on that bandwagon last year. But as you mentioned about Terry and McTavish and the cerebral mentality that they bring on and off the ice, it's clear that it's going to be someone on the young and up and coming side of things. I could totally see, let's say they go with next year in Cronin's 2nd year, Terry captain and McTavish assistant captain, and like Fowler gets an A just because of that overall presence. I could see that as well. But David, I'll pose it to you, and you can answer the same way Zach did, or your thoughts on this. I personally don't see, and a lot of people have said this on social media, that a lot of people have a problem with the Ducks not having a captain. For me personally, I don't think having a patch on your jersey that says C or A is going to change the mentality that's already on this team. They're going to go through things at practice, on the bench, in game, so on and so forth. You don't have to have a patch on your jersey to show I'm the captain of this team, I need the praise or this. I think that's a little bit of a farce. That's just my take. David, what do you think?
Yeah, it feels like a tradition. I mean, I played on plenty of teams where, the captain usually was chosen for specific reasons, but maybe the vocal leader of the team wasn't. He was maybe an alternate captain or whatever, or not even wear letters. So, a little bit of that is probably for show. There's obviously the idea of respect when you wear that C too. So, but I think it's rooted more in tradition. As for this team, I mean, you're playing to be competitive, to grow, to get better. You're not playing for Stanley Cup, probably even like this season, even as excited as we are after the Carolina game. It's playoffs would be great. But you're playing for improvement, and you don't need that sort of, tunnel vision focus leaders gonna drive you through the playoffs. Right now, you need team cooperation, bench management. That's where the captainship is really going to show. Is your team composed, or are they playing every shift hard? Are they giving it all? What are they doing in between the lines in practice? Like, that's where you're really going to see the leadership come out. Going to Cam Fowler, yeah, years past we've talked about how he was kind of the obvious choice because of his tenure. Came up with the team at a really young age. Never really hit that hype that he was targeted with, but he's had a really nice career and he's a really good player. So that shouldn't be a knock against him. But if he was going to be the captain, it would have already happened by now. And it probably would have happened like 1 or 2 seasons ago. So, yeah. So with him, it's with this team, you get a real sense of, at least from the outside, like a changing of the guard, right? The guys like the Henriques, the Silverbergs, the Cam Fowlers, they are going to be phased out at some point. There is a real youth movement going on with this team, and Troy Terry is smack in the middle of that. And for at least me, is the obvious choice if they do go with a captaincy next season. I know Zegras is kind of the face of the team right now, and it's because he's got all the personality, which is great. It reminds me of a little bit of Getzlaf and Perry. And Perry was the hothead, and Getzlaf's that cool reserve captain, kind of keeping the line together and everything like that. So it's great to have personalities like that on your roster. But Terry, to me, kind of seems like the natural fit, and I'm really interested to see how McTavish develops and how his chemistry with his line mates evolve, especially.
Yeah, and I think one thing to expect from this Anaheim Ducks team, it'll be definitely different from last year, because McTavish was one of the guys that was always being constantly juggled in the lineup. Are you going to play wing? Are you going to play center? What's the situation going to be? I think Cronin has a great idea of where everybody's fits are.
Isn't it so nice to finally have some sort of semblance of an idea of what the lines will look like? Last year was like a mess. They didn't make sense half the time. Why are you riding Derek Grant so hard? It's nice to finally let the kids go out there and prove what they can do.
Yeah, it's stability is always a great thing to have, and especially within the lineup. Again, we talk about this again. I hate to beat a dead bird again, but we talked about this with the Angels and the constant lineup switching, and the Ducks were going through the same thing last year with Aikens. And it's one of those situations where stability is going to prove key, and I think Cronin does a terrific job of proving that already through training camp in the first 2 games of this season, where you could see the players are going to get comfortable, and they're going to get comfortable in their ways of, they're trusting me with this job, I'm going to go execute it, and there is no secondary worries of, am I going to be benched today? Am I going to be this, or do I have to switch over and change my mindset? There's not going to be any of that. So with on the ice and with defense and forwards in that mindset, I think that's a great token to have. Now, on the different side of things, there was a lot of conversations in the offseason, contractually wise. And Zegras got his money, Drysdale got his money, Terry got his money. We'll put those three aside for a minute because I think we all agree that those three were going to be a core. A deal was going to get done regardless of how long it took or what the structure was. A lot of the focus was, what are the Ducks going to do about John Gibson in net? And he still got some years left on his deal. There was rumors that he wanted out of Anaheim, and there was some muddled talk about, well, I never said anything, or this. A lot of talk. You have Dostal, who's playing very well, but John Gibson was in net opening night against Vegas. Zach, what do the Ducks do with the Gibson-Dostal situation? And is Gibson still the right man in the net for the Ducks in this particular time?
I think, when it comes to the goaltender tandem, Gibson, I believe it was the third goal that he gave up against Vegas where bad line change happened and he didn't even try. He just stood in his crease. And I'm just like, what are you doing? There's been a lot of discussion about, how he pushes from his left to his right to his left. Like his T pushes are not as strong as they used to be, which I know that he's had a lot of groin problems, excuse me. If I'm the Ducks, and I know when that stuff broke, I mean, when he said I'm done in Anaheim, I think he said something, along the lines of, to the wrong person. It wasn't on a podcast. He probably said something and then it got blown out of context, or maybe it was true. I don't blame the guy for wanting to look. I'm getting towards the end because you're a goaltender. Your shelf life is very short.
Yeah.
Not everybody can be a Marc-Andre Fleury, not everybody can be like that. And so, and this is what I was listening to Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts today. If you're the Ducks right now and you see the way Dostal played in the last game, if I'm John Gibson, I'm worried. I'm like, this kid's got it. And I said it last year when he came up from the San Diego Gulls, is that I believe John Gibson is the past. Lucas Dostal is the future. When Alexander Gage gets it together down in San Diego, he's also going to be a part of that future. And this young and upcoming Ducks team it's just starting over. And with John Gibson, if I am the Ducks right now, with how bad the Edmonton Oilers have been goaltending wise, you go and you make that trade with the Edmonton Oilers and you acquire Jeff Skinner, have him play maybe starter, maybe if things get bad enough, hypothetically, you make that trade, you move on, and you have Lucas Dostal be the starter. You have Jeff Skinner be the backup. I think Jeff Skinner has like maybe 1 year left, but that may be a hot take. But that's just, I think John Gibson's days are numbered in Anaheim. And I know for some, they might be like, yeah, but he's got like 4 or 5 years left. He's got a terrible contract. Terrible. So,
yeah, Bob Murray put that on the tape and we're having to suffer through that one right now. And it's one of those situations where I think a lot of people and a lot of Ducks fans will sit there and say, you can't trade John Gibson because of all the star-studded plays he's made in the past. But as you mentioned, Zach, that's the past. We're in a different era of Ducks hockey right now. And it's almost like Gibson is that one element of the past that's still clinging on to the Ducks' future right now. And again, it's no diss to John Gibson. He's done everything he possibly could in this time with the Ducks. And I wouldn't be shocked at this point if Pat Verbeek at a certain point says, okay, we got to do it. We got to send him out. If it's to Edmonton, if it's to anywhere else, the interdivisional trades are always interesting in that sense because you're sending him to Edmonton. You're going to see them X amount of times a year. That could be an interesting scenario, but I don't think the Ducks are worried about that in this moment of like, oh, well, we might have to play Edmonton in the first round of the playoffs and Gibson could backfire against us. I don't think that's the one thing holding something like that back at this point. I don't think at all. David, Gibson has been a figment of Anaheim Ducks hockey his entire tenure. And the Ducks do a phenomenal job of creating, drafting, and developing goaltender talent. From Jonas Hiller to Victor Foss and Frederick Anderson,
Guy Bear,
Jaguar, the whole list top to bottom. The Ducks, that's one thing about the Ducks I've never had a moment of worry about, is who's going to be our goaltender this year. Even through Gibson's ups and downs, it's like, I know Gibson, he'll have a bad game here and there, but I'm not worried about that position. So with that in mind, Gibson take for you, David, and is Dostal, is it his team soon? Is the clock really ticking on fan favorite John Gibson?
Yeah, Dostal's ready. He was ready last year. And like you said, I always trust the Ducks to bring in the next big goalie. So it's never like been a doubt. When it comes to Gibson, man, he used to, play through injury, put his heart out for the team. So I feel for him, especially now that, effort clearly hasn't always been there. Now we've had the controversy over the offseason. It just kind of feels like, put hockey aside, it'd be mutually beneficial to ship him out to a contender that needs a goaltender. And the Ducks do right by him. They can also move on to Dostal. Feels kind of like, we talked a little about football, but kind of like a Green Bay Packers situation. It's, it could reignite Gibson's career. Good for him. That would be awesome. And the Ducks could finally move forward with the goalie of the future. So it feels kind of like a win-win for the Ducks to move on in that sense. I feel, though, if they wanted to maximize value a year or two ago, would have been better to do it. Book's kind of out on Gibson, that he is over the hill. So the contract always stunk. So you're still dealing with that, even with the trade now. But I feel like there was a little bit more value trading him in prior seasons. But still, even now, a team like Edmonton that gets desperate, because they always exist, especially around the trade deadline, you could really get something still for him. And I think on the emotional level, the Ducks be doing him a favor, assuming they're competitive this season, but still not vying for the playoff spot. I guess we all assume that development's still like a year or two away from like really becoming monsters in the NHL. But yeah, I think it would be doing him a favor, it'd be doing the Ducks a favor. And it's kind of time for a mutual breakup. It's the best way I can put it. No hard feelings. It's what's best for both sides.
And we know GM Pat Verbeek is not afraid of making a deadline deal. And if those situations occur, I think Verbeek will feel content with the decision to let John Gibson find a way to ride out the sunset, finish the career, finish the contract with another team in that sense. David, and we'll do quick takes here between you, myself, and Zach here. Between Terry, Zegras, and Drysdale, 3 new contracts for the Ducks this offseason. Are all 3 of them in conjunction fair, foul, deservedly so? I know the timing of Zegras and Drysdale kind of butted right on up to training camp, and a lot of people were thinking that those 2 players were going to have to hold up. But overall, how do you feel about the 3 deals for 3 young Ducks players?
Seems fair for all parties. A little bit of risk for the Ducks in some circumstances. The Terry deal could hurt, but I think they had to do it. No real complaints. They met middle ground. Sometimes got a little bit closer to the asking price. I felt like they took care of the players. And at the end of the day, if you want to retain these guys, let's say they do break out, let's say Zegras just gets better and better, and then all of a sudden his market value skyrockets. You've done right by these guys to kind of earn yourself a little bit of trust and leeway when it comes time to future negotiations. So I think the Ducks are doing right by their players, taking care of them, and smart business deals they had to get done, and they did it. So that's kind of how I feel about it.
And Zach, you and I talked about this the last time you were on, was when we were talking about arbitration deals and money. Things take time. And this has been a current theme of not only the progression of the Ducks' new era right now, but contracts take time and relationships mature. So same question for you. Between the three players, fair, foul, was the timing good, bad of how Pat Verbeek went around this business? Because I think everything went as good as it could have gone. There was no holdouts. There was no ill will within the media. It was just strictly business.
I think, and to first and foremost, to tell Ducks fans, like, man, we've been through it this summer. Like, I think that's one of the biggest key things for fans is just, man, like, I don't think any of us could have ever, thought Drysdale and Zegras not coming to camp. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things. But I think Zegras and I predicted 5.5. I think that's a more than fair share. I think Drysdale's deal was more than fair. I think he got a little bit more of a pay bump, even though he only played less than 50 games. But I realistically think, and the thing that worries me, something I'll add to this, is that, Zegras is pointless in 2 games. And I know it's only 2 games. And I want to see him put up a 90-point bomb this year. I want to see him prove the front office wrong and say, look, I wanted you to pay me. If he goes 5 games without no points, that's a big question mark there. And even though there's like 75, 74 games to go, that's kind of it's kind of a topic to bring up. So,
it's when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, they got their money. They got paid. Mm-hmm. They're guaranteed with the Ducks for the next 3 years, at least, Zegras and Drysdale in that sense. And it was a little bit shocking in my side of things, just viewing it from an outsider perspective as a fan. Drysdale, like you said, didn't play 50% of last year, and he got more money than Zegras did. And Zegras, did what he had to do. So I'm sitting there and saying, is there something maybe that we don't know that's going on internally in those conversations? Because I have to assume there has to be. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Because we didn't know anything about what Drysdale was asking. Like, we still don't know. No. Zegras, he was asking around 8 to, from what I was told by a few sources, he was asking around between 8 and 10. And I'm like, bud, like, you have been in the league for 2 years. Granted, you've been on a crap team for 2 years and you put up 60 points. But to be in that class, and I made a video on it on my channel, is just like, you have to be 90 to 100 points to get the money you're asking for.
Yeah.
Troy Terry, I mean, I know I didn't touch on him, but I'll tell you, him putting up back-to-back seasons the way that he did, and I remember Ducks fans wanting him to be traded. They were saying he was a bust, before he started putting up numbers, because Troy Terry, it's all about this development process. It's about, I need to be in the gym more than I need to be on the ice. I need to work on these certain muscles that I haven't worked on, because when you're on the ice, there's only so many muscles you're working on. So, when Troy Terry got what he got, I was like, yeah, kid, you deserve that money. You deserve what you got. But Zegras asking for 8 to 10, and I don't think it was so much Zegras. I think it was morely his agent. Drysdale, it'll probably be a mystery for ever. And I think that's the thing, all of us Ducks fans are wondering, like, what was he asking for? Because I think that Drysdale wanted a long-term deal, and so did Zegras, kind of like the Getzlaf and Perry deal, but we just weren't there. You guys weren't there yet.
And I think if maybe Jamie Drysdale plays an entire season last year, maybe there's at least a better conversation for that long-term deal that's like, okay, I had a litmus test from this year. This is what we liked. This is what we didn't like. Kind of play through it in that sense. Overall, there's a good, not good. That's underselling it. There's a great sense of this Ducks organization right now from top to bottom. And as Zach, you mentioned it, AHL San Diego is doing a fantastic job so far, 3-0 to start off the season. There's the younger core, the younger core, almost like the junior young core that's still taking place down there in San Diego. Fast thoughts on San Diego, what they have, what's coming up the pipeline that you like so far. And David, I'll get to you on the same thing right after.
I mean, I know this is going to be an obvious one, but Olen Zellweger, man, like watching him in camp, watching him in preseason, watching him at the rookie showcase, this kid is NHL ready. Like, I know that they want him to develop. They want him to boost that confidence. But man, like, I don't know how many points he got in the last game or if he got any. I know they're 3-0.
Yeah,
but he has three.
He's chipped in with a couple so far.
Yeah, he's got 3 points in the first 2 games. Yeah. And I was surprised. And I think the biggest thing that I'm like, this is a huge positive for us fans at the moment. Sorry for the loud noise, but is that we have a defensive problem where it comes to guys who are trying to crack the roster. And I think that's a big problem to have with us right now, is that Olen Zellweger is going to be a big part of this future's franchise. And, you know, with San Diego, you got guys like Jacob Peralt. I was watching a lot of Chase DeLeo, which it's unfortunate what happened to him with the knee on knee. I really thought he was going to crack the roster. He's not a very good puck possessor because he's a little bit smaller than most guys. But Jacob Peralt could definitely make the roster. Nathan Gochar, I mean, he could be another one that could make the roster. It's all about just developing these kids. And like Pat Verbeekus told us last year, Ducks fans, be patient. You know, this is a 5-year process. And I said it. I was like, this team is going to be competitive by 2025, 26. And, you know, this is a very, this is one of the things that I say to Ducks fans, the most exciting time is watching these kids develop, watching them progress. You know, when we're winning, it's a little bit more stressful because we hold them to such a higher standard. And now it's like, okay, we'll see what happens. You know, just give me your best shot. But, you know, I think San Diego is going to go up from here. I'm not saying like Calder or playoffs or anything just yet. But, I mean, if somebody goes down in the top 6, Olen's going to get that call.
Yeah, so far through 2 games, he's got 3 assists, 3 total points. He looks like a complete package player, and echoing everything that Zach said. Just like John Gibson, the time is ticking. The time is ticking in a positive sense for Zellweger. He's going to be in a Ducks uniform sooner rather than later, and I think at some point I think we will see him at some point this year. I know they're big on his development, but again, 1-2 pegs go down injury-wise, and a spot opens up, and he could play his way into this roster and this rotation for the Ducks lineup. David, any positive points from San Diego? Again, I know it's very early. It's still very early in NHL and AHL, but you know, Zellweger was going to be my point of discussion. So Zach, thank you. You're mind reader in that sense. This is why we have him on the show. You like to have fun. But David, what are your quick thoughts on San Diego so far this year?
You guys nailed it. You talked about everything I kind of wanted to talk about. I'd be shocked if Zellweger doesn't crack the roster at some point this season. We see more of him. We kind of talked about it a little bit last year. He was obviously killing it, and we were like, all right, when are we going to see this guy in Anaheim? So it's great that he's off to a great start. He's really making it difficult to keep him down there for the front office. So that's always a great thing to see. I've seen Regenda's got some points. I know he was kind of a fan favorite last year. Came in and contributed. So it's just all about the development. Wins are great and all that, but I just want to see players getting better and making it difficult for the front office to keep them in San Diego. That's the best thing you can hope for.
And there's really nowhere to go but up from here. Again, the Ducks having their franchise worst season. San Diego was not too far off. They had a horrendous year last year in the AHL. So really, it's a sense of renaissance and rebirth right now for everything through the Ducks front office. And before we get to one of the last portions of the show, even though the season has begun, we're going to get to some predictions, not only for the Ducks, but for the division and for the NHL. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe here to this podcast video. You can get all of the Katella Chronicles podcast right here on YouTube and our website, www.katellachronicles.wordpress.com. And you can also follow us on X and Instagram at Katella_CHRON. And you can follow everything Zach Gray, Ducks Gameday Breakdown on Instagram at Ducks Gameday Breakdown. So, prediction time, folks. I know 2 games into the year, so we have 2 freebies. You know, the Ducks 1-1-0 to begin the year with a fabulous 2 points. Where do you see the Ducks going this year? So give me where they finish in the division, placement-wise, and who is a couple highlights, who's maybe the leading scorer, the assist leader, and maybe how things shake up within the division. Our guest, Zach, you're first up, buddy. We're going to put you under the spotlight.
I see the Ducks missing the playoffs. I could see them, realistically, making progress there, development-wise. I could see them finishing 20 games under 500, Obviously, the fan in me, wants to see them squeak into a wild card spot to get that experience under their belt, but I just don't think that they're quite there yet. But leading scorer wise, I could see it being Trevor Zegras. I could see point total wise, I could see it being Mason McTavish. I think Mason McTavish is going to have a breakout year. Right behind him, I would put Troy Terry. I know that those are obviously the 3 obvious ones. Underrated side of things, I would say Frankie Vetrano. Because he's been one of Greg Cronin's guys with the Islanders, and he gets what Greg Cronin is selling. I could see Frankie Vetrano being a sleeper pick. So
nice. What about the rest of the division? And who do you think who gets the guaranteed playoff spots, or how do you think the Pacific Division shakes out?
As much as I hate to say it at this time, I think it's going to be Vegas. I think Vegas is going to run away with the division. I think the Kings are going to be right behind them. The Oilers, I could see them missing it, but with the expanded playoffs, I could see them becoming a wild card team. But the Kings really got, the pressure on them now because their window to win is these next 2 years. And Vegas, I don't see them being back-to-back. I could see them just, getting in, losing in maybe the second round, and that's about it. So
we see it all the time, too. Look at Colorado a couple of years ago. The fall-off happens quite frequently.
Yeah, hockey's one of those, popular sports that you do see a fall-off, and the back-to-backs are very rare when it comes to the NHL. So, great thoughts. Let's see, David, you're up to bid now. What do you think goes on for the remainder of this Duck season?
I agree with Zegras being the leading goal scorer. I think Terry probably takes the points as well as the assists, so that's where I'll differ. I think he'll really pick it up midseason and kind of replicate what he did 2 years ago. In terms of underrated, you know what? I'd like to see Henrique have a healthy season and him be dangerous again. And help this young squad. So that's kind of I'm hoping it's a wishfulness, I guess, but that Henrique is like the underrated star of the season. In terms of where the Ducks finish in the division, I kind of like where they're at right now, 5th. I think that it'll fluctuate, but Sharks don't do it for me. Kraken could take a step back. Oilers could take a step back. Calgary, who knows? I think the Kings will be up there. Vancouver is always hit and miss. So, you never know which team you're playing depending on the night. Yeah, I think, Golden State, the Golden Knights, they do run away with the division. I don't know. I think the Kings, I think that pressure may be a lot. I like him at 3rd in the division. But yeah, I think the Ducks probably sniff the playoffs around like the All-Star break, the trade deadline, like they did a couple years ago, and really show some improvement because I mean, can't get worse than last year. So that's that's a given. But it's a lot to ask of a young team that's already shown that they make a lot of mistakes. I'm pretty sure they have 12 penalties already this season. They've already given up 4 shorthanded goals.
Mhm.
They're gonna play some flawed hockey, and that's okay. That's okay. This Ducks fans need to understand that. It's not going to always be pretty. It's not always going to be exciting, but it's all about development. And I think finishing sort of the middle of the division, or just below, is an acceptable result for this year's squad.
Yeah, I think as long as you learn from the mistakes or the trials and tribulations that happen with a young squad, the Ducks are going to be in a nice primed and poised position. I think overall, again, you can't get any worse than last year. I think if the Ducks can improve, they had 59 points last year in the standings. If they can get anything above 70 points this year, I feel that's a good progression. That's about 5 or 6 games improved from last season. If they can sniff 80 points and get to a 500 record, I think that would be even a stronger case for forward trajectory in the future. I think Troy Terry ends up leading this team in scoring and assists. I think he's going to have a very big breakout year. Once again, Mason McTavish, I really like what he's bringing to the table. An underrated player that I've already liked through the first 2 games of the season, and I know we didn't get to dive in too much to him on this episode, but whenever Zach wants to come back and talk more Ducks hockey, I'm definitely sure we can do that. Pavel Minchikov. He has looked absolutely phenomenal through the first 2 games, gets his first career NHL goal after making his debut against Vegas. I think he's going to be somebody to look upon on that blue line to really make an imprint of, hey, I'm here. This is my position. No one's taking it from me. I don't need to be shifted. I don't need to be moved. This is where I'm going to make my mark. So I'm going to look at him having a big breakout year this year in his rookie campaign. Overall, I think the Ducks they're better than San Jose. I think they can be better than Vancouver. I think after that, Calgary's always a wild and wacky team. I do think it's Vegas, the Kings, and Seattle surprised me last year, the Kraken.
They're off to a bad start so far this year, too.
Off to a
they're
bad
not
start.
doing so well.
Yeah, so it's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde type mentality. But, I can't honestly say, and be 100% confident say Calgary and Edmonton are going to fall off the face of the earth. You just can't say that right now. So I think looking at if the Ducks are battling for 5th, 6th place, I think that's a good positive trajectory. If they're sniffing a playoff spot, that's like extra credit in school. I will take that any day of the week. It will not harm anybody. But if the Ducks can get somewhere in that sweet spot, over 70 points and approach that 80-point mark and get to that, 500 record in the regular season, I think that's a win overall. I like what I see from this team. The intangibles are there. The pieces are coming into focus. And I think all 3 of us covered it extremely well in this episode that it's going to take time, but there's positive things to take, and there's absolutely no way the Ducks can do any worse than last year. Am I right? I think we can.
That was the floor. Yeah.
That was the floor. Hopefully.
I was going to say is I think it's the structure of the team and the way that it's run now. I think with Pat Verbeek and Greg Cronin, they both vibe very well. I mean, they both met with each other for over 5 hours over in the off season. And I just think these two get each other, and it's from the Steve Yzerman regime, from the Detroit Red Wings and the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, the biggest thing is that I look at this and just by coming to 1 game in the regular season, I mean, you can just feel it in the pond. It's so different. It's not this, oh, okay, well, hopefully we win. It's not that anymore. And it's just, if we get to a wild card spot, say we're down to the nitty gritty and we face a 1 seed or even a bottom seed, and we somehow get through, or even if we lose, I mean, that's a huge positive because this team is playing with house money. I mean, and we want to make a name for ourselves. So
exactly. And I think David could probably agree with this one. Your ban on the Angels does not account for the Ducks. You're going to Ducks games this year, am I right?
Totally separate. I've already
Let's go.
scheduled out time. I love the Seminoles. I love the Ducks. I love what they're all about. The franchise, like, it's really easy to root for. I get why, like, I've lived out of state and I know Ducks fans that have never even been to California. So it's like it's an easy franchise to root for. And yeah, I'll definitely be at a few games this season.
Absolutely. Well, gentlemen, thank you both for coming on the podcast today. So great to finally sink our teeth into Ducks hockey, where there's positive momentum, something to really look forward to. The three of us, let's make this a regular thing. I think Zach adds an incredible amount to the show for his Ducks perspective. Zach, for the fans watching at home, Ducks Gameday Breakdown, you came back last year to the Instagram world. You do your game by game breakdowns and so much Instagram content, which is always awesome to see. Shout out your page right now. Shout out what you do. This is your platform.
Yeah, I mean, you guys can follow me on Instagram. You can follow me on TikTok. I'm on X, but I mostly just get my news and information through a couple of sources. But mainly follow me through Instagram. That's where all the stuff gets posted. So yeah.
Zach is one of the best. So great to have you on here on the Katella Chronicles podcast, talking Ducks hockey. I think it's only apropos that all three of us just catch a Ducks game together at this point.
I'm down,
man.
I think we got to make it happen. There's a lot of positive this year. Ducks fans, for those that are watching, get excited. Ducks hockey is back. The fall weather is slowly coming into Southern California, even though it's still in the 90s right now.
But like 95 tomorrow.
Yeah, something like that.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's hot.
I think next week though it's in the 70s.
Yeah, typical California. You never know what
totally
to predict. Weird. You can't predict the Angels. You can't predict the Dodgers. You can't predict the Ducks, but there's positivity around the Ducks. But once again, thank you to our good friend and guest, Zach Gray from Ducks Gameday Breakdown. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Looking forward to having you once again. Cheers to my beautiful and fantastic co-host, David Goodkind. David, it's nice to see a smile on your face when we don't mention the Angels too much.
Yeah, it's great. I love not talking about the Angels.
And don't forget, fans, you can check out all things Katella Chronicles on X and Instagram at Katella_CHRON. And of course, our website, katellachronicles.wordpress.com. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe on all our podcast videos right here on YouTube. And until next time, I'm Dominick, that's David, and that's Zach. This is Katella Chronicles. We are the heartbeat of pro sports in Anaheim. Have a good night, everybody.